to get through. So hi everybody, thank you very much for joining. I'm just going to kick off this session by introducing our chair and our speaker today. Before I do, I just want to say a few words about ICRRA, which is the network under the auspices of which this webinar is happening. We have some members of the ICRRA network on the call. Hello. But for those of you who are not part of the network and are not familiar, ICRRA stands for the International Cultural Relations Research Alliance, which is a global network. The British Council co-convenes this network with our partners in Germany, IFA, the IFA. And we are a global network of researchers and practitioners, people who are working in the field of cultural relations or researching cultural relations. I think we probably all know what we mean by cultural relations, or we probably all have slightly different ways of defining it and understanding it. But broadly, I kind of see this as the different ways in which states and groups and individuals and civil society and NGO connect internationally across borders through arts and culture. And that's what we kind of study and work in the context of ICRRA. We are a global network, and our aim really is to bring in these global voices, global perspectives and views on the field and practice of international cultural relations and understanding it from different contexts and different points of view and different geographies. We want to share knowledge and resources and opportunities with each other, and we want to promote and share findings from international cultural relations as a discipline and as a practice, and kind of promote understanding of the field and the approach. So that's what ICRRA does, and one of the ways in which we do that is through webinars such as this. So thank you very much for joining, and to introduce our session today, as you will see, and we're all sort of coordinated, by the way, in our dress. We've all got stripy tops on, as we realised earlier. So anyone else who's wearing a stripy top, well done for getting the memo. We're joined today by Rhonda Zaharna. I very briefly introduce her. She's a professor in the School of Communication at the American University in Washington. Has a specialist in intercultural and international strategic communication, over 30 years experience in teaching and researching and communicating this, has advised many people and organizations and missions, including the United Nations, the World Bank and NATO. And just to give you the titles of some of her recent books, they include Boundary Spanners of Humanity, 3 Logics of Communication and Public Diplomacy, which I think we'll be hearing much more about today. Also, Battles to Bridges, US Strategic Communication and Public Diplomacy After 9/11. And The Connective Mind Shift, Relational, Networked and Collaborative Approaches to Public Diplomacy. So you can get a good sense of expertise and interest from that, and that very, very relevant they are both to the world we're living in today and to the aims and objectives of ICRRA. And our chair, sort of moderator for this session from the ICRRA network is Natalia Grincheva, who is a program leader in arts management at LaSalle University of the Arts in Singapore. Also an honorary senior research fellow at the University of Melbourne. She's a digital humanities scholar and practitioner who specializes in data-driven cultural policy and diplomacy. And her career spans from foundational work on UNESCO's 2005 convention to the pioneering Data to Power platform. And again, is the author of many works, including 3 monographs, and I'll just list the titles here. They are Geopolitics of Digital Heritage, also Museum Diplomacy in the Digital Age, and Global Trends in Museum Diplomacy. And she's also working on a new monograph at the moment entitled Digital Soft Power of Heritage Media, to be published sometime in the future by Cambridge University Press. So go out and buy those books or get them from your libraries and read them. And on that note, just say thank you very much for Natalia for organising this and for Rhonda for joining us. Really looking forward to the discussion. I will pass over now to Natalia. I guess I pass over to you first.
Thank you so much, James, for such a lovely introduction, and welcome to everyone to this very first session of the ICRRA Global Webinar Series, Unscripted Dialogues. This series is designed to bridge theory and practice, connecting you directly with pioneering thinkers in public and cultural diplomacy. And we are very honored to host Professor Rhonda Zaharna today, who is distinguished scholar in public diplomacy and strategic communication. So her latest book, Boundary Spanners of Humanity, and I was really lucky to see Rhonda personally when she was still working on that book. When I made a visit back in 2018 to Washington D.C. to American University, because one day I studied there, and she was telling me very exciting about this book and the research she was doing. And I thought, wow, I can't wait to read it. So, this book offers a vital new framework for our interconnected world based on the three powerful logics of communication: individual, relational, and holistic. And it explains how relying on just one logic can create crucial blind spots leading to conflicts and misunderstandings. So, to transform friction into collaboration as boundary spanners, we have to wear actually three hats: the one of the storyteller, another one of a relationship builder, and finally the system thinker. And today we'll try to learn more about these logics, translating them into a practical toolkit for meaningful partnerships and impacts. So, Rhonda, thank you for guiding us through this essential conversation, and let's start. And my first question to you will be about your personal journey that led you to this book. So, could you briefly maybe share your own personal path or the core milestone that made you to think about writing such a book? Many in our network are practitioners who've lived between different cultures, of course. And hearing your story, perhaps a pivotal moment of cross cultural misunderstanding or insight, would help us connect to theory to the lived experiences of being a boundary spanner. And do you consider yourself as a boundary spanner, and why and how so? Because when I saw this book title, Boundary Spanners of Humanity, I could totally connect right away to this title because I lived so many countries and I experienced so many cultures. It's like, wow, the book is just for me. So right now the word is to you. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Natalia. It's wonderful to be here with ICRRA, and I'm just in awe of all of the work that y'all are doing. And you put a lot of questions in that question, so let me try to peel back. One, uh, do I about the boundary spanners? I think everybody on this webinar is a boundary spanner. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here, or be part of ICRRA, or be part of whatever you're studying, um, because that is the whole that is the what all the cultural and arts and the study is about. It's about finding differences or finding similarities, commonalities in a world of difference. And I'm stumbling here because I got the idea of boundaries spanners. That's what I'd written about throughout the book. And Nick Cole was reading it, and I had the original title of Ambassadors. Um, Ambassadors of Humanity. And he said, but you keep mentioning boundary spanners, boundary spanners. And so I played with that and I said, okay, we'll go with boundary spanners. And then I did dedicate the book to my father, my late father, because he was a boundary spanners. He came to the United States and met my mom and oh, about why did I get into this? Because my father was from one part of the globe and my mother was from another part of the globe. And growing up, they could look at the exact same thing and see two, three, four different things. And as a child, I'm sitting there like, well, what's that about? That's kind of like disorienting, or it gave me multiple different perspectives. And then I was just fascinated by that. And I was fascinated by languages, how the same thing could be called different things, and not only called different things, but seen different things. And so, yeah, that's where I went to Georgetown because they just had like you could study 47 different languages. And I thought, wow, that's what I want to do. And I just love that. And for high school, I got two little suitcases and I was just going to go around the world and see everything and do everything. So I just was fascinated. And then I discovered culture, this thing called culture. Um, and and then I was just fascinated by it all, and then just studying intercultural communication. So yeah, that's kind of my story there. Yeah,
Wonderful. I really like how you decided finally to use boundary spanners rather than ambassadors, because I wouldn't be so much connected if it was ambassadors of humanities, because it has this kind of connotation, very official language, right? And
interesting.
yeah, maybe even negative connotation, because sometimes ambassadors, they bring bad news, or they start new chapters in the relationship that are not necessarily positive. So yeah, boundary spanners much so much
I
better.
can I do a tag on that? Um, for boundary spanners, that originally comes from Brian Hawking. He used the term boundary spanners, and I love Professor Hawking's work. I like him too. Um, but what he was talking about boundary spanners, and he's a diplomatic scholar, and he used the word boundary spanners to describe ambassadors, to describe diplomats. And when I started the book, I was writing for diplomats. I was writing for states. I was writing for nations. And that's the way, the lens I was looking at public diplomacy. And as I was writing the book, it came to me that boundary spanners are really people. And the boundaries, the ones that are going to be the public diplomats of the future, are not the states so much as the people. The technology was going in this direction. The communication, my field is communication, the communication dynamics were going to the very much the social and the people level. And I think that's playing out now, and I can talk about that at some point. That's why I'm onto this peace thing, because of the dynamics of connectivity and diversity and interactivity that we have now with the technology, um, and what's happening off stage. States are commanding the attention, but it's the off stage, what people are doing, what civil society is doing, organizations, international organizations, all of this activity that's occurring, that's not getting the attention. Those are the boundary spanners. And so that's where I shifted my attention. And that's how the logic started coming up. Okay, if it's not going to be this official stuff, um, what about the people? So
Yeah, I'm glad it
it's,
happened that way. So you wrote this
Sorry,
book.
Natalia, can I just jump in? Sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt. I just wanted to say I forgot to ask everybody who's on the call, if you have any questions, comments, reactions that you think of as we go along, please do pop them in the chat, and we'll come to them later. So yeah, any questions that you think of, pop them in the chat. I can see there's a chat and there's also a Q&A box. Natalia, which one should they use? Any
Any,
preference?
any.
Any or both?
use
Excellent. Okay, so
chat.
put
So, because I see
just chat.
webinar chat, and these are
Yeah.
the kind of things that help me in my research because I'm an academic. So this helps me.
Okay.
There we go. Thank you very much. Sorry to
Yeah, fantastic. Yes, all the questions are very welcome on the way. So you wrote this book just before and during this period of very intense geopolitical disruptions, right? The war in Ukraine, the Gaza conflict, rising United States-China tensions, right? In these 3 years since its publication, do you think that these events reinforced the book urgency or rather challenged its premises? And how is the framework of these three logics specifically relevant for navigating today's polarized and complex international environment? Is changing or not changing right now?
Okay. When Natalia, I started this book after the Battles to Bridges. Uh and that was what was 2010. So and when I was writing Battles to Bridges, um the US was this giant in communication. I testified before Congress and they grilled me, and it's like, we're the giant in communication. What's going on with all our global communication? Why is anti-Americanism on the right? What's happening with all our communication? What's wrong with our messaging? Um, and so I didn't write this book now. I I've been working on it it was a good 10 years. It was after 2003, and the US had gone into Iraq. And that was why are we all thumbs at communication? And when I was looking, why is all thumbs? And I was this intercultural communication scholar. And so okay, well, they're doing everything by the book. They're following this model, they're following this model, it should work. And bummeroo, it's not working. What's going on here? And so that's where, and I have like 9 bookcases of intercultural communication and cultural and all this, that, and the other. And so I just put them aside and said, okay, let's put communication away and just start from scratch. What happens when people come together? And and so that's where I started this whole global tour to try to understand what happens when people come together and rather than communication, just an experience. And I found out that relations was I started looking at all these ancient history books and ancient cultural books. The internet was pretty rudimentary with the translation, but I did all these kind of trans crazy translations to try to understand. And that's where the logic started coming up, the different perspectives, the different dimensions. And um, understanding, instead of understanding communication through the lens of culture, um, through the lens of relations. And the whole reason I didn't like the intercultural communication models, it's you're either an individualist or a collectivist. You are direct or indirect. You are high context, you're low context. And I did know Professor Hall, Edward Hall. I had the opportunity to, I was participating in a seminar, and he was just this fabulous thinker. He was sometimes called the father of intercultural communication. And anyway, what he said was that there was just this, not this obsession, but this tendency to see either or, things as a dichotomy. And there was never a third dimension. And so intercultural communication is kind of like this dichotomy. It's said it's supposed to be a spectrum from individualists to collectivists. Um, so I didn't like this dichotomy. I didn't like cultural categories. And then also it became this geo culture after Hofstadter's work. He did it. He started on culture, but then it became nations. So you're either the Chinese culture or the Arab culture or the French culture or the British culture. You're not, you can't have either or you can't be something else. And one of the things that was so fascinating was when I looked at the ancient studies, in Confucianism, there's individualism. And then in the Greeks, they talked about harmony. And so, and if you look at a lot of the other text, there's just this exchange of culture. And I'm thinking now intercultural relations is really human relations in a context of diversity. So anyway, I went off on a tangent. As you guys have to stop me, I will do that. All right, so where were we? Okay, so is it relevant today? Yes, we are still human. Yes, we still seem to have these differences. And yes, the logics, and we can get to the logics, I guess. I can explain those, but that's the background on that. And that's where I get to talk about these things that are not in the book. So anyway, next.
Yeah,
Sorry
this
about that. I'll go on tangents forever. So
no,
I'm
no, no,
looking
no,
for
that's
the
fine. We
questions.
really needed this background before we come into the logic. And you're right, the logic question is coming just right now. So, for participants in the room, could you briefly describe these three logic, the storyteller, individual logic, right? The relationship builder, the relational logic, and the system thinker, or which is all about holistic. And what core lessons each of us can learn from these logics? And more practically, what is a telltale sign or simple question we can always ask ourselves to recognize which logic is dominating in a particular scenario we are in? Or maybe all of this logic are always present? So, equally. So, what is your intake on that?
Okay, your last statement. Yes, they're all present. It's all different ways of looking at the, I would say, human communication experience. It's part of that communication, not as a message, not as relation or even holistic. It's just part of this human communication experience. And the logics, I originally called them dimensions, but one of my students thought, like, no, they really dinged me on that and said they didn't really like it. And so it kind of influenced me. I went more toward logic because it was a way of thinking, but really each one of the logics really come from different parts of the ancient texts and the contemporary texts, but they're all present at one time. We can see, I love your things, the storyteller, the relationship builder, and the system thinkers. Um, I really saw it as dimensions of the communication experience. The first, the individual logic, and I'm going to write that, the individual logic really looks at the communicator, the power of speech and language and the verbal. And this is what makes us human is we have this capacity for speech. Uh, the relational logic is really about the power of emotion in communication. Part of our brain, the limbic system, has no capacity for speech, but we communicate. Oh, the thing of vibes. We have vibes. There's a feeling that we get when we're around people. And even if we don't say anything, we can feel it. Art and culture is all about this way to communicate that doesn't involve speech. It involves movement, it involves sound, it involves um, just emotion, that we connect on an emotional level. The holistic logic is that we're all connected. Going back to the ancients, we communicated spiritually. And there's still a spiritual connection. Um, and I love this that we can put things out into the universe. Before there was the internet, there was serendipity that we would, by coincidence, run into people. You see, oh, embodied communication. As humans, we have no capacity for language until what is it, about a year when people, but the infant, and I love this for Professor Hall, we communicate through, oh my gosh, entrainment, that the human, the infant, as much as early as 3 days old, they look and start matching the body movements of the mother. And we look at the eyes, we coordinate. And there's a brilliant, I love it. It's not really brilliant, embodied communication. We don't talk about that anymore. Nonverbal communication, but embodied communication is really our first way of communicating. And we synchronize all of the military training that creates bonds of the esprit de corps is coordinated movement. When you have coordinated physical movement, coordinated speech like chanting, oh, you go to a soccer game, and people are chanting that builds the spirit. That is synchronous movement. It's a way of communicating, and that's the holistic communication. So I went off on another tangent. You guys have to watch me. So this is why I do research as I go down these rabbit holes. So those are the three dimensions of communication. And if we were not on Zoom, but in person, I would be speaking. That would be one level. We would have a vibe maybe of connecting emotionally. Maybe you like me, maybe you don't. Maybe you had a bad morning, maybe the coffee machine broke down, or you burnt your mouth on the tea or something, or maybe the kids were rowdy. Um, that would be an emotional dimension, and I would pick up on because we have mirror neurons. Um, and so, but then holistically, uh, there would be a history in our relationship. We could be just meeting, or we could be old friends. And I remember what you did not too long ago. And maybe I'm still carrying a grudge, or maybe we could be, and it's cold. It could be that we're cold. That would be a contextual. So, anyway, it's not this one way. I send the message, you get the message. I receive the message, I interpret the message, I send it back. I package my little information and send it back to you. No, it's a whole three-dimensional, and that's what I took from all the ancient, are all these global dimensions. There's a three-dimensional view. So, does that help?
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned that if we were in a physical room, but I'm thinking right now, I feel the vibe, I feel your energy, even being in the completely different part of the world right now. Maybe because I know you personally, but I do feel it's not only the first logic, right, of storyteller. There is a relational and even the whole systemic also connection going on. So, but I'm also a lover of digital technology, so I might be biased about the potential. But I do feel like it's amazing that right now I've seen in the chat so many people from all parts of the world and from Latin America and from Africa, right, from Europe. So I'm now located in Singapore. We're all together and we are thinking about the same things. So that makes us one group and community. So back to their global thinking. I like global thinking and I like geography. So my question is about geography of these three logics. So is it possible or useful to map these logics geographically? For instance, could we say that the individual logic predominantly proliferates in Western context, the relational in Eastern, and the holistic in indigenous networks? Or does our digitally mediated interconnected reality, just where I referred to it just now, where we all constantly navigate multiple overlapping communication spheres, make such geographic differentiation completely obsolete? And in short, does the framework suggest a new fluid global ecology of logics rather than fixed regional preferences?
You're wonderful. I love this. What is it? What did you use the last thing? The new, what is it?
Yes, global
Fluid,
ecology of logics.
fluid. But the big thing is fluid. And
Yeah.
this is the one thing that intercultural communication didn't have. You were individualist, you were collectivist. and the individualists were all in the West, and the collectivists were all in the East. So I got off myself on a tangent there, but I did too much stress there. But fluid, what would you think? Um, and this is this intercultural model, and they still have all the books out there, and these models are still very popular. Um, but the problem is, one problem is, I did a talk in New Zealand, and this is when I was first working on the logics, and and they called it, charitably naive. So, but um, the person that picked me up was from Hungary, married to someone from Thailand, and living in New Zealand. So, okay, which box am I going to put them in? How am I going to know how to communicate with them? Because they're obviously all blurred up. And this is a lot of what the world is about. And this is what a lot of the people that we meet now and on the platforms, as you say. So, and then also, Bummeroo, those dichotomists, what was really fascinating to me was Hofstadter's work was done in the 60s, which was the height of the Cold War. And so, in really looking, one thing that had always disturbed me about these these categories was they seemed a little bit biased. The individualists look like really wonderful, and the collectivists look like the Borg from Star Trek. They were all collectivists, no brains, no thinking. They just kind of did whatever there. And one of the things that was what fascinating to me was it seemed like there were different collectivists that had different types of relationships. And what was really fascinating was when I started reading about all the contradictions. Like the collectivists had very strict borders of groups, in group, out group, right? Well, then, guess who's got the really strong borders now? If you look at the individualists, quote, the individualist cultures, they've got up some of the strongest, biggest border walls around and really trying to keep the in group, out group very distinct. Where that's supposed to be the collectivists that do the in group, out group distinctions. So, all these contradictions that were coming up with those models. So, that probably didn't answer your question, but anyway, food for thought.
No, you're not a fan of geography.
Oh, no, no, not a fan of. Oh, that was the original
Yeah,
question,
yeah.
or I would have thought. Yes, no. No, I guess no. No. I like geography. I like culture. But humans are incredibly complex and just incredibly filled with contradictions. And culture, as a reflection of humans, are incredibly complex and have these amazing contradictions. And then they all blurred together. This is yes. So,
Yeah,
so,
so just to challenge you a little bit on that, just based on my personal experience, right? So I lived many countries around the world, but the majority of my professional life was in the Western country, rather would it be United States, Canada, Australia? But 5 years ago, I moved to Singapore, which is Asia. So in the first 3 years of my life in Singapore were miserable, completely miserable, because I was lost. It was very difficult, like a baby, to learn from scratch the communication logic, to understand how it all works, to intervene into these networks and develop relationships. It was the hardest thing ever in my life. But I'm in 5 years right now. So in February, it will be 5 years anniversary of my life in Singapore, and I'm actually not moving out in the near future. I found myself finally here, and I love being here. So, but I like the I for me, the world is divided into different communication spaces, right? Where if you don't know how to navigate within the space, you need to learn, and it's very difficult to adapt. And it is connected to geography. It might not be connected to geography, but at least like Western countries and Asian countries, for me, I felt it very acute. So, how you can comment on that? If any comments, if not, we can move to a new.
Oh no, I have lots. I always have I can have lots of comments. But what your thing, your so when you said you first moved there and you were miserable, that's what my dissertation was about. Columbia. Um, I again, I was this intercultural scholar, and I went to do field work, and I went to the Middle East, and I knew the language. I thought I knew the culture. I thought I knew the people. I was there, and I'd been there, and I'd studied, and then I had um, all the books talked about culture shock. And I'm like, man, it's not about the culture. I have self shock. And that's where I started studying the connection between identity, communication, and culture. And this was in the 70s, 80s. And this thing of culture shock, it wasn't culture shock. I put it as self shock. And that's what my dissertation was about. There's nothing wrong with the culture. It's not being shocked. It's my sense of identity that had been rooted in one geography, one framework, and I learned to express my identity using these cues. Like, I'm going to be nice this way. I'm going to be respectful this way. I'm going to be intelligent this way. But all those cues were in this setting. When I moved to another setting and tried to express my identity, it wasn't, what I was getting mirrored back wasn't working. And so that was this identity shock, is that the tools that I had for communicating and the cues I was using wasn't reflecting back to me the identity. And so that was the identity shock. And then this connection between behaviors and identity. Now, what I would say is you probably use speech to try to get along with everybody, because that's what we do. We design messages. Communication is about message. If I would do for what I learned, this is where the dimensions come in. Synchrony. Synchrony is just a powerful thing. The cue to adjusting, finding the rhythm of the people. What's the rhythm? Try to feel the rhythm, the synchrony. There is a synchrony in the way that the environment's moving. That's your environment. Okay, so there's also an emotion. Use the emotional dimension. What do you feel? What's the feeling with the person? What's the feeling that's getting? So opening it up. And this is where I guess the logics do come in. Try exploring different dimensions of communication, not relying on dialogue, on finding commonality, watch the pattern of traffic. Watch the pattern at the groceries or the market. And that's the first thing I do when I land in a place. And I was in Mexico, and Cesar, and then way of my host, I said, I gotta go see the markets. I gotta go see the markets. Wherever I go to the markets, because there's a rhythm, there's a vibe, then you feel the emotion, you hear the tone of the speaking, and yes, it's raw. Oh, you the smell, the colors, what's being sold, how are people interacting, to get a sense of the other dimensions of how people are communicating, and to get off of this thing of, okay, let's talk and find commonality. No, it's not going to happen. It's going to be a long, painful process. A shortcut is get out and explore the other dimensions of communication. And yes,
Oh, you tell about this so beautifully, and I wish in the real life things turn out in the same way. But my path was a little bit harder. Anyway, so I understand that the book proposed this kind of layering of logics com- and. But still it's a bit abstract and hard to understand how you can layer these logics or mix them together. Could you walk us through a concrete, maybe step-by-step strategy or example of how a diplomat or a project manager working across cultures might strategically blend these approaches in a real world scenario, like negotiating a community-based conservation agreement or launching a cross-border public health campaign or whatever, right? For example, should we always start with a holistic map of the system and all actors and only then identify which key relationship need to be introduced, and how do you sequence and weight these actions tactically on the ground? So where do we start with this layering?
start with what you feel comfortable with. Start with where you are and keep in mind that the communication experience, the more dimensions you can bring in, um, the wider the reach, the wider the resonance. Um, if if you want to start with the message, start with the message. I'll do what's coming to my mind is fisher folk in Barbados. And one of the more things I've been working on are the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And there was the one of marine life, the marine populations that are affected by rising sea levels, by environment. Um, and so maybe the message was marine justice. Um, that's the verbal, that may be the call. But again, the emotional, again, the holistic, the connection, the community. And so, what the University of West Indies did was they started doing working in popular theater with the fisher folk, the people that lived on the dock and the marine that did fishing, and poetry, theater, um, song, um, and storytelling. And through this, they developed ways of telling their story, telling it to each other. It was part of the culture of music and dance. And then they also developed their verbal skills for policy in order to join policy debates because they had been out of policy debates. So that's different layers. You've got the emotional layer, you've got the community, the holistic layer, you've got the verbal. Another one I'm thinking of, I don't know, for another reason, I did reviewed a dissertation that was on communicable disease, non-communicable diseases. And this was in Trinidad and Tobago. And it was people joining the network, and they did it verbally because it was on Zoom and that. But what they really found was that making the offline connections was building community and also building connections. And so they added that dimension just grew organically, but that's what made that network stronger. Whereas the other one that just relied on sharing messages, sharing research, sharing this, um, kind of fell flat. So, so in building in the layers, it's just realizing that as humans, we communicate, or the communication experience has multiple levels. And the more we bring in, the wider the resonance. And this is what makes art and culture so incredibly powerful, is art can make things immediately understandable. It can communicate on an emotional level. It can, and that shared experience that we connect with. And that's a community building. That's a holistic dimension. And getting people to participate. Oh my gosh, when that's what the Confucius Institute, one of the most brilliant things was the dragon boat races. When you have people moving in synchrony, that creates bonds. When you have building the dumplings, working in synchrony builds bonds. Getting people, oh, James, one of the fascinating there was a campaign, it was called Think, I think it was Think China. One of my favorite examples was a British sculpture artist went and worked with the people in this village in China, and it was prominent was red clay. And so what he did was the people built little figurines. Were about the size of a hand. And the thing is, they had to be about the size of the hand. They had to be able to stand up. And so the villagers, the people participated, and they made thousands of these little sculptures, and they did a whole sculpture garden. And then I think it was Prime Minister Blair and his wife toured this sculpture garden. But that is an example of multiple layers where you've got the emotion, you've got the physical, and it's building in these, that's the different layers. So, all right, there we
Yeah,
go.
wonderful. That's so beautiful. So, I just want to remind our attendees that we have only even actually less than 10 minutes left, and we're still waiting for your questions. So, if you really have a burning question for Professor Zaharna, for Rhonda, then please put it in chat. I will ask another question, and I actually have lots more, but
Oh,
our time
okay.
is limited. Yes. So, and while I'm asking this question, I hope there will be some questions from you so we can have more interactive conversations with all participants on
Did James have any?
I do, yes, absolutely. But let Natalia go first, and then I'll come in unless
Okay.
someone beats me
Yeah.
to it.
So
So there
I
we
will
go. The
ask.
challenge has been set.
Yeah, I will ask a practical question. So, as practitioners, we are often trapped in our cultural and professional communication lenses, right? And beyond the theoretical framework, are there any specific practical rituals or practices you can recommend to force ourselves to step back and consider the other logics? Maybe a simple checklist or reflective question, a team role playing exercise. For example, could it be as simple as always appointing just a team member in the meetings to ask, how would this sound to our most critical stakeholders, right? Or what are the second or third order consequences of this announcement? So I know you already covered a little bit this question, talking about the markets, how you go into the streets, but imagine you are coming back to the space of negotiations, where people are in their room and they need and they have limited amount of time to come into to consensus.
It's basically, what do you want out? I always ask for communication experience. Do you just want to reach those people that rely on verbs? Do you just want to reach those that are words? Do you want to reach those through an emotional? Or do you want to build community? How are you going to build community if in building in that layer? That's a checklist there. Um, yeah, I guess that's the only thing, because I don't think you can force it. Otherwise, it's just not going to work as well as you'd like. So, if you're relying on one dimension, it's just not going to work as well. So yeah,
Okay, and do you
I
think? Yeah, Something else?
No, I was just gonna say, where I'm headed. I'm like I did the logics. I'm looking more now toward the humanities centered, back to the boundary spanners and humanities centric public diplomacy and humanities centric cultural diplomacy, because all of the wicked global problems that we face, we need problem solving, identity mediation, emotion mediation, conflict mediation, all of these different dimensions that go beyond state-centric. So that's where oh, and consensus. I'm working on consensus communication. So how the logics have taken me in different directions.
Yeah, right. Interesting. I'm looking forward to reading new books from you. So, another question. Do you think that the meaning of our messages could change if we change them across different logics when they are being translated from one logic into another? For example, could a specific call to action or plea for help rooted in individual or community's acute need might be reframed or risk getting lost when translated into a holistic logic where systemic harmony and stability are paramount? And how do we preserve urgency and specificity in our messages? I know you would say message is the
See,
individualistic logic, right?
yeah, that's it. That's it. It's relying on the verbal. And if you look at that, how do we do our messages? How do we do this call? How do we do the translation? All those are verbal. They're verbal, they're rooted in the verbal, which is the individual logic. And Bummeroo, we just we just messed up. We've just relied on one logic. Um, Especially now in this age, TikTok is 6 seconds visual. Um, we're moving to not even visual, we're moving to the video. And this is part of the holistic. It's a whole different dimension. It's not a call. It's not a message anymore. Hello, everybody. It's not. We've got to get away from this reliance or this anchor of message and think visually, think holistically, think in videos. And this is what's so fascinating. I'm old. I've got gray hair, but um, this generation grew up in a holistic, connected, and thinking holistic. Thinking it's not the message, it's the impression. It's the sentiment. It's not what did they say, it's how did you feel? What's your impression? Do you feel connected? Do you feel yourself? Do you feel authentic? All of these things that have nothing to do with what anybody said.
Just
Okay.
if I could come in, and I was going to sort of ask about the medium in which you communicate, and specifically thinking about social media, but other forms of digital communication. And this is a very sort of real life scenario for organizations like the British Council, where we're trying to kind of rebalance the offer between what we can provide sort of face to face physically and what we can provide digitally, and sort of breadth that you can get digitally versus the sort of more deeper kind of communication maybe that you can get in person. So I guess my question is sort of for organizations and projects that are thinking about digital communication or working digitally, what are the kind of implications of your research for how they should approach that? Do they need to approach it differently? What does it?
Think instead of messages, think of how can I evoke a communication experience? How can I use the tools to evoke maybe the experience of community, maybe the experience of goodwill, maybe the experience of connection, of hope. This is one thing. Yeah, I'm just working on a piece now on hope, why there's hope, and why the human DNA of cooperation. But this is the whole thing. How can, instead of communicating a message, how can I create a communication experience. And connection, anything, I see the dynamics, prevailing dynamics, communication dynamics is connectivity and diversity. So anything that kind of taps into those dynamics, I think is going to get extra mileage. And this, so using the tools that evoke connectivity, connection, that celebrate, again, the diversity that's just buried in there,
Yeah,
the whole thinking, the feeling of it. And it's creative. And that's what artists do so beautifully. They do so beautifully. And that's why I guess we connect and resonate with it.
yeah.
It's thinking outside the box. It's the creativity.
Sure. Thank you. There is actually a question that's just coming in the chat. It looks from the chat as if it's from me, but I assure you it isn't. It's from someone else who's logged in somehow under my name. I'd love to know who it's from. Maybe you can post whoever's posted this question, if you could also post separately who you are really called. It's my colleague Diana. Excellent. Okay, so this is from Diana, a colleague of mine at British Council, who's asking, as you may be able to see, how do you when it's obvious, when you're in a situation where it's obvious you're from different cultures, or you're coming at it from maybe different what was the word you the different logics, are at play. How do you kind of address that as quickly as possible when time's limited, and the time's running out, the sands are going through the timer?
That's the whole thing. Our projects connects when it's obvious that we're from different cultures. Well, that's the obvious thing. What's the not obvious thing? What's the similarity of the human experience? What's the similarity of the human experience? And that's where the projects will connect. That's where it'll be easier for trust. Trust quickly. Trust is like this magical little term. And then we somehow think if we trust, then we've got it. But there's a whole way synchrony builds bonds. We think that trust builds bonds. Synchronous actions builds bonds. If there's an energy, it's coming through my voice. That's a bonding thing. What's the not obvious? And make it obvious the human connections. If there are different cultures, what's the similar human connection that artists can find and evoke? Does that answer some of the thing? And the connection, it's already there. It's already there. By the whole thing that we even want to connect.
Yeah, I'm particularly struck, sort of reflecting on what you've talked about, by the way that you stress the importance of emotional communication and embodied communication, and how art and culture are particularly well suited to that kind of communication. And maybe that's part of the answer. When you're not connecting verbally, that's where art can come in and make that connection happen. And it can be very immediate and transcend.
Music, we respond to people's voice, we respond to people's movements. Um, I mean, there's just in that there we respond physically. This is what's so amazing about the human and the human experience of communicating, and how the so many ways to communicate without words, or that can even shape the way words are heard or understood or felt.
Yes, yeah, thank you. And that emphasis on feeling, and how to making space for people to express how they feel, I think is a really powerful thought. So thank you. I'm conscious of time. I guess, Natalia, we have to wrap up now.
Yeah, yeah.
So thank you very much, Rhonda, for sharing these thoughts with us today, and talking about your work, and hearing from your experience. And thank you very much, Natalia, for making this happen, and for your excellent steering of the conversation.
Yes.
And thank you, everyone who's joined the call. I hope this was interesting, and I want to have your ideas, suggestions, and proposals for future webinars. So reach out to me if you have any thoughts or ideas ahead of the next one. Natalia, do you want to say anything by way of closing
Yeah,
remarks?
I just wanted
I want to thank you.
to thank Rhonda for this wonderful, eye-opening, illuminating, enriching conversation. And yeah, I just I will follow your work, and I'm very grateful that you're being my life mentor. So, and I'm learning every time lots of amazing things from you. So, I also wanted to say that I think it's what we are doing right now. This conversation with a scholar about the book is something new for ICRRA, and we started some kind of new things. And I'm thinking if our attendees can suggest what other books they would like to discuss or other scholars they would like to invite, they are very welcome to share this either with James or with myself, and we make it happen for you. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the next encounters. And thank you, James. Thank you, Rhonda, for being here in this room today. And we shared a brilliant, beautiful conversation today. So thank you.